interesting. So what does community and civil society, what role do they have in helping victims of domestic abuse who aren't, if we're going to make the comparison with Tibetan refugees, they're not necessarily having a collective experience, they're having an isolated experience, although there might be other victims, and if they knew that there were other victims, maybe they would feel less alone. But it's, as you rightly said before, just reaching out to various groups is a form of independence that could be dangerous for them. So how could they begin to form, have a support network outside of their familial home, apart from their own family, extended family? How could they begin to have links with the community, with civil society, and how could other people, like, for example, if I wanted to know who in my community were suffering from that issue, and if I wanted to go and help them, and apart from donating to a charity, what could ordinary citizens do to sort of take part and actually change this?
That's actually a difficult question to answer, because I don't think there is an immediate solution. In lockdown, there was a rise in reported incidents of domestic abuse, and this rise came from third parties, so neighbours or interested citizens, and in fact it was suggested that couriers, postal workers, and people that might be in contact with household should keep an eye out and report possible issues. But there are two problems. Firstly, that incidents, the police might respond. They would have an obligation to most likely, respond. But most of those third-party reports will be recorded as incidents, which means they're not don't go on to be recorded as crimes. And if I can give you the statistics for the last year, the last reporting year. This data is from the Office of National Statistics, which is it offers up a wealth of data that can be mined. So in the last reporting year, there was 1,316,000 domestic abuse related incidents. So 1.3 million recorded incidents and crimes lumped together, but they're split on a roughly 50-50 basis. So 43% of those were just recorded as incidents. Now, why does that matter? An incident can be flagged up as, and in fact, over the last few years, police have been encouraged to flag incidents that are domestic abuse related, hence the fact that we have the statistics. But what happens, and we've already talked about this, is that domestic abuse tend to be cumulative. It's many, many minor incidents. And if each call out results in another incident being recorded with no crime being recorded as a next step, then you have a situation where it can lead to a kind of fatigue on the response side, or it can alter social perceptions. The incidents are seen as minor, and this goes to the root of coercive control, which is not immediately visible. So if you start getting into sort of things like shouting and maybe a little push or something, you know, over time, multiple incidents can lead to the perception of a victim that is a problem victim. It rather than a person with problems experiencing ongoing cumulative trauma, what is being or maybe perceived when things are viewed through this lens is a problem person, someone that is overreacting, someone that maybe has drug, alcohol, or substance abuse issues. As with other victims of trauma in war, refugees, so on and so forth, domestic abuse victims have a much higher rate of substance abuse issues, alcohol and drugs. They also have a high rate of mental illness. And this can lead to negative perceptions that undermine the credibility of their experience in reality. So if we're talking about how to respond and help people, then clearly I think nothing will change until social perceptions change, until it's understood that abuse is unacceptable at the point of origin, at the point of coercive control. That it doesn't require someone to be present with a black eye and be killed or something for us to identify a perpetrator and intervene. So yeah.
I see. Yes, it definitely is a very challenging issue to solve. But thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciated your thorough response to all my questions. And do you have any final words for the audience?
Yeah, I think that if we're looking at going forward, I mentioned that this is a complex issue and requires social change at a deep level. Obviously, legal remedies are important, but if we're really going to change things, then we have to change attitudes, and that it doesn't matter who the victim is. It doesn't matter if they're male, female. I've talked a lot about women because they represent about 80% of victims, but we men during lockdown accounted for a huge rise in calls to services. So that's also important, that we start recognising that abuse can happen to anyone. That much the same goes in a sense with challenging images of perpetrators. There is no definite typology of a perpetrator. They come in all forms. Interestingly, and I just to illustrate this example, perpetrators, a study, I had the name of who did the study somewhere, but a study shows that perpetrators' measurement of their heart rates varies. In some perpetrators, rather than what you might expect it being an outburst of rage and violence, their heart rate would rise, quite the opposite happens. It lowers. They, it's so normal to them. It's relaxing almost to commit the abuse. But it's variable with different people. There's no one type of perpetrator. There's no one type of victim. And I think that the only way that we can really move forward is by getting past stereotypes of who victims are, why they behave, why don't they leave, why do they stay, and perpetrators too, because abuse can have an ongoing effect. Children that are witnesses of abuse go on to have, as adults, it's been repeatedly shown that they can go on as adults to have quite significant mental health issues, substance abuse issues, or themselves. Therefore, fall back into a cycle of being abusive. So tackling this requires so much interdisciplinary engagement at all levels: law, policy, health, economics. It is an ongoing fight, I would say, for the right for people to live full and free lives as individuals.
And I suppose it's about stopping that negative cycle, if you can.
Exactly. The cost to society, to our society, are in fact huge. And if you consider the economic cost of solving the issue, of putting institutions in place that can deal with it, that can outreach, in comparison, the cost is small if you take the long-term picture, the wider picture into account.
Yes, we should probably start to account the costs of people not working and so on and so forth.
Exactly. Victims of trauma are more likely to have medical issues. They're more likely to have there's a link between them having cardiac issues, for example. All of these things will probably go unnoticed in as governments tot up the various costs to services generally. A victim might flag up as someone who's a cardiac problem. In fact, that cardiac problem might be the result of years of abuse. So the effect, and as you just highlighted, the future effects on our children into the next generation. These deserve addressing, not simply because we need to address the trauma of victims, but it affects everybody in some. We want these people to be productive members of society. They one does not know what they might achieve, contribute, had they the means to.
Yes.
And I think that is critical to bear in mind.